Good evening, everyone. On behalf of NISM, welcome you all to this webinar that we have organized on prevention of money laundering challenges and scope. Let me take a minute to introduce you to the today's speaker, and he's none other than Sir Krishnan Vishwanathan. So, Sir is a seasoned financial services professional with diverse experience in operations, technology, operational risk, information security, compliance, and internal control. He is a prolific and engaging trainer who has been facilitating risk training programs. So he keeps the audience really engaged with real life example and big picture approach, catering to various hierarchical levels of participants in an organization. He has worked in multiple areas of financial services like custodial services, AMCs, IT services, exchange and international banks, and has also held senior positions in MNCs like ABN AMRO, Alliance Capital, Barclays, and many more. So, Sir conducts training in all modes, be it e-learning, virtual sessions, or even in classroom. So I think this will be a really great session for all of us. And to add a cherry on the top, he is actually the Chief Executive Officer of Chris Consulting, which is a unique boutique risk advisory and assurance firm. So I welcome you, sir, and I hope this session will be really engaging for the candidates as well, and they can learn like a great deal about what money laundering is and what are the challenges and what is the scope of their career in this segment. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Nancy. It was always a pleasure to be associated with NISM. I'm back here. And thank you all participants for finding this 1 hour just at the nick of a long weekend ahead. So that itself shows a lot of how much you all care about this program as much as we do, right? As this, right? Yes. Chris Consulting is about 4 years old, and then with all these things, thanks for that nice introduction, Nancy. And let's get going as to what are we expecting in today's session, my friends, is that we are going to talk about the importance of money laundering. It is just like preaching the converted. We are trying to be talking something that we all intuitively and intrinsically know that that's the biggest concern, right? Having known that a little bit more about it, why is it very important? What are the current challenges as an organization, as a government, right? It's just not this. The globally, why is it a very big challenge? And how do the various countries, jurisdictions take care of it? And how does the institutions that are part of it have to do? And finally, it boils down to each and every one of us, and we have made a good start by being a part of this program today. Just as much as we have challenges, it also throws up a lot of opportunities, right? Especially as a career in AML, what does it take to really take charge of this an opportunity, right? Which is getting bigger and better by the day, and for the right person, I think there are opportunities galore. So let's talk about it, and then finally, I may request that the questions be put on towards the end, and we will spend some time on that. Yeah. So a quick peek at the stuff. This particular slide tells you it's basically coming from one of those very large AML technology consulting firm, Finergo, and they come out with an annual AML fines and penalties. And which way it goes, and they've been talking of something like close to $52 billion, right, over the past 12, 13 years, which is almost like 42,000 crores. And to give you a comparison, it is about the daily volume of NSE, is market capitalization. The daily turnover is about 60,000 crores, right? Give or take a few thousand crores, but that's where it is. It is that big an amount, right? And the sort of, we're all talking of billions of dollars of penalties. These are not monies laundered. These are all penalties levied by the regulators globally, right? You do find a lot of fines happening in the APAC right? Largely because that is also sprinting up. India also is not lost out there, about $9 million with 24 instances, largely coming out of KYC, right? And as always, the US is a little bit lower this time. A lot of it has been, we've had some big ones in the past. Europe is about $3.4 billion, largely coming from one UBS, right? 2.03. I want you all to specifically look at that particular point on the top second one, right? The 228 individuals fined, right? This is something that is, we should take a little closer look at it, that where it can be any one of us, right? This is for people who are supposed to do something and they failed to do it, or they abetted it, whichever way it is. If they are a part um, of the offense, then they have a personal liability over and above the organization, right? Little thing, we'll find this as the best of all the organizations. It is just not that um, penalties are paid by very small organizations who have got very not so great processes and procedures or systems. You are seeing practically the big names in the markets, right? And the big names come bigger problems, cross-border transactions, and one-off person somewhere in one of the branches doing something or not following procedures can really land the organization in trouble. And something like BNP Paribas paid the single largest fine of about $9 billion. $9 billion, right? We're not talking of small amounts of money. Again, we see the ex-Dance CEO, then we have a MoneyGram compliance officer. They've been personally penalized, made persona non grata, kept away from the financial services for a certain number of years or even for lifetime, right? So any of these things can happen, and that makes it that much more important that we pay attention to it. It's just not only in the global, right? Even if you come to India, you find quite a few instances, largely coming out of KYC and non-compliance to that, right? It's getting much and more tougher these days, right? And I'll just say that what was seeming to be something like a 10,000 rupees and 20,000 rupees as penalties, now even RBI and SEBI are talking of in crores of rupees, and personally fixing accountability to people who are lapsed. Yeah. So on that note, we're talking about it, right? But just that we need to get started off with that, with what is money laundering. So here are a couple of definitions from big things. FATF, which is the Global Nodal Agency and Intergovernmental Agency based out of Paris, right? They have defined, they are the ones who are the leaders, or maybe global nodal agency, which ensures good compliance across the various jurisdictions. It defines money laundering as the processing of criminal proceeds to disguise their illegal origin. And if you look at something like a IMF, it talks of a processing of assets generated by criminal activity to obscure the link, right? Basically, one thing is to assimilate the ill-gotten wealth. The other one is to make sure that you're disguising it and then you're obscuring the link, meaning that you can't trace it back to the original criminal. ACAMS is one of the leading training agencies in the world in the space, and then they say that it's concealing or disguising the existence, source, movement, destination, illegal application of money, right? And FinCEN brings in about a terrorist angle to it, largely coming out of the infamous and quite cruel blow to the mankind, which is the 2001 Twin Tower tragedy, where they found a lot of similarities between the way monies were funded for the attack, right? Had an uncanny resemblance to the money laundering typologies. So that is where FATF revised its 40 recommendations and added 9 special recommendations, and those 9 also got subsumed into the revised 40 recommendations in 2012. in 2012, which we are currently following, and the global jurisdictions are expected to follow, right? What does our own Indian regulations say? Indian regulations is a little interesting, right? It just does not define money laundering. It defines what is, interestingly, the offense of money laundering. If you do certain things, then these are all money laundering. Whosoever directly or indirectly, look at the choice of words, right? Attempts to indulge or knowingly assess, or knowingly is a party or is actually involved in any process or activity connected to the proceeds of crime, including its concealment, possession, acquisition, or use and projecting, or claiming it as untainted. Even claiming it as an untainted property, right, shall be guilty of offense. So, whichever way you go, any of these acts can really get someone into trouble. Even the very person is a part of the action, right, not even completed it, right. An attempt itself could be, whether unsuccessful attempt, not translating into money laundering, can also be seen as a criminal offense under the PMLA. The PMLA was in the year 2002. The regulations came in 2005. Then we've been having a series of amendments to that as late as yesterday, where even the CAs and the cost accountants and the company secretaries, or anybody dealing with the various bank accounts and investments of the clients, right, they will also be in scope of the PMLA, which is a very, very using a very big brush, and a lot more people have been brought under the scope of PMLA, which large people were largely thinking, this is more to do with the banks, right? And now it is getting bigger and bigger, and where each of us have a lot more role to play on that, right? So a quick one, in terms of stages of money laundering, how does it happen? First and foremost, you have to understand that for money laundering to take place, you need to have ill-gotten wealth, right? Like most of us have got salaried income, which is purely taxed by the employer, and we get it. So we feel that we don't have much of a scope for monies to be laundered, because that's very clean. But where someone has a proceeds of crime, the proceeds of crime is basically any activity, right? It can be a criminal activity, in economic crimes. It can be like tax evasions, tax frauds, or the securities we are talking of, front running, market manipulation, insider trading, any ill-gotten wealth apart from the very commonly known corruption, bribery, ransomware, the new looks ransomware, or even something like the, interestingly, unfortunately, is the environmental crimes, endangered species, cryptos. All these things are all the various sources of ill-gotten wealth. When you have ill-gotten wealth, and how do you proceed to legitimize it? Because a person doesn't want to sit on pillows and beds full of currencies, right? They want to flaunt that wealth and then want to live a good life, though the money was ill-gotten. So this goes through three stages, the classic 3-stage of money laundering, which is placement, where you can just visualize a real bundles of cash, because proceeds of crime is always cash, right? Because it's fungible and then it's not easily traced. Then that gets placed typically in the banks by placing it within the limits, or through friends and associates who we call SMERS. Sometimes it is also translated in, the word is transformed into other assets like jewelries or high denomination currencies, right? Like 10 lakhs of rupees can be made into a very small bundle of 10,000 euros, right? So we are transforming it, paying off some loans. These are the ways by which money gets. The idea is to get the money out of the immediate vicinity of the person who committed the crime. But still, the money can be traced back to that person. So then starts the, how do I make it? Obscure it. You remember earlier we are talking about obscuring the link. That happens in the layering, where you're trying to distance it, not only physically, right? Physically, but actually electronically. You can do it, sit in your laptop through a series of account transfers, through shell companies and overseas investments, tax havens, it gets more and more complicated because it's offshore. So you have the you need to have some treaties and take some time. Then there are data privacy issues. So all these things give enough time and cover to the launderer to still find some time to go ahead and do the needful. Ultimately, all of this should translate into a personal wealth. When you say integration, that money is back into the person's wealth, and he or she, the launderer, the criminal, actually pays taxes and says, "This is my wealth." It could come in the way of luxurious flats, beach-facing houses, securities, investments, which also grows, right? So it's a part of their lifestyle. So this entire process is what is called the stages of money laundering. And typically, we say that it's all a banking. But if you see here, the Indian securities market, SEBI has been extremely proactive. You can't, there are no, you can't buy securities on cash, no cash deposits, no third-party accounts. There are lots more tighter things in terms of off-market deals, completely dematerialized electronic holding of shares. Lots of these things have gone a long way to make sure that the ability to go down to the individual is that much there, and therefore it is more in the areas of layering and integration is where the Indian securities market comes in. Yeah. Typically, if you see here, about 2 to 5% of the total GDP of the world, right? 2 to 5%. That's a study conducted by agencies, and then we are talking of a $95 trillion global GDP, which means that we are talking even at the base minimum of 3%, we are talking of $3 trillion. And if the AML were to be an economy by itself, right, it would be the 5th largest economy, tipping India to the 5th place. And if you are converting all that money into $1 notes, right, and stack it one on top of the other, you'll reach up halfway the moon. Spread it next to each other, it could be double the size of Goa or Kerala. So you visualize the problem, then you will know how big it is that we are trying to address, right? This is the biggest, one of the major challenges of the global regulators and the enforcement agencies, not only because of the economic offense, because some of these things have got this ability to even fund terrorism, right? And the proliferation, right? All these things are all something which makes the global governments extremely uncomfortable. They are just going big time behind these things. All right. How do we develop a robust? So we're not getting much into the various details, but we're straight away going to say, what does it take to create a robust AML program, right? So I'll give you a little bit of a quick, it's not on the slide, but I'll tell you the way it works, right? Originally, money laundering was seen as a local problem, domestic problem, localized problem coming out of drug trafficking, right? And that all, it started off it has been there for ages. It has been, some of these things have been mentioned even in Kautilya's Arthashastra. It's there, the references are there in the Roman and Greek. Ever since money was there and there were taxes and people started evading it, right? Then the proceeds of crime started and money laundering actually started. And the interesting thing about money laundering, it's a crime. But that is only the second crime. Behind every money laundering activity, there is an underlying predicate offense or another one crime. It could be in terms of a criminal offense, it could be a fraud, it can be a tax evasion, or so on and so forth. So when we are talking of such a big thing, right? So FATF initially thought it was a global domestic problem. Then in 85, they said it's okay, it's a cross-border drug trafficking problem. Then in 1989, they realized, no, it has also got much larger stuff. So they started off FATF in 1989. And then it got more and more active. And in 2001, after the Twin Tower attack, then it became much stronger. Now there are 39 members, 37 member countries, 2 organizations as members. They come out with a lot of these recommendations. It is 40 of them, which has been going strong for the almost like 10 years now. Very strong. It gives you a common guidance. How? Because there should not be a regulatory arbitrage where the launderer is moving from one country to another country, which is more easier and where he or she can manage. So they want some common minimum regulations. So FATF does that. And so that 40 recommendations is sort of more like not only a guideline, but also an expectation, right? And one of the so through that, though there are 37 jurisdictions and 2 member countries, all the countries in the world, but all the other jurisdictions need to follow. And therefore, India also being one of them, India is one of the members also. So you come out with the PMLA, the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. You have to criminalize money laundering as an offense, and whole lot of expectations are there, right? So that is how FATF has been able to bind or bring all of them together to see it as a global problem where everybody, all hands to pumps, and everyone is behind it. So whatever you are learning here in money laundering, whether it happens in India or elsewhere, it's more or less the same. A small changes here and there, but in terms of the threshold limits could be there, the reporting time could be like in US, you have to report within 30 days, but in India, it should be 7 days. So some of these nuances are there, but otherwise as a concept, interestingly, is the same thing, right? FATF is a very powerful organization, and what it does is that it just goes ahead and they're coming to India to evaluate the efficiency of the money laundering capabilities. It's been going on, and they're visiting India later this year. Just like we know how Pakistan worked hard to get out of the gray list. It can be extremely important, so all of us have an important piece. So quick one on this, we have to have very strong policies, procedures, and controls, very strong, right? It should be a board approved policy. That's how from the country, it comes down to the regulators like SEBI, RBI, IRDA, each of them come out, like IFSCA came out a few months back. So that's how, and FATF's guidelines permeates down, and it brings about a lot of commonality between the various regulators within the country and also within the various jurisdictions across the world. Then you need to have designated officers, and because the time is scarce, people are scarce, funds are scarce, so there's a risk-based due diligence is possible. And finally, it just boils down to the employees of the organization really doing the right thing. So a lot of focus on training, annual training, skill-based, role-based, level-based training programs across including the outsourced agency is mandatory, right? And finally, you need to have an independent audit function. These are some of the expectations. And then in the interest of time, I will just show you what it takes for the process of the risk framework. As an institution, you need to have a risk framework. Then you need to have a formal process of risk identification and assessment, identifying the gaps, having a technology and systems and processes to monitor and report it to the FIU. And should there be any inquiries coming from the agencies or the regulators, you need to do it, periodic review, and finally reiterating on training. So what are the expectations of SEBI, right? The SEBI's expectations are fairly simple and straightforward. In fact, I had the privilege of talking to a few of the market intermediaries across the country, where I've been conducting workshops as a part of the capacity building program. And the expectations are fairly straightforward, that you need to have a measure should be commensurating with the nature of business. That's why it's very important that I'm calling it out first, because one thing that's a practitioner, right? As for me, AML is only one component of the offering. I do a whole lot of consulting and implementation of risk framework and training programs across the entire GRC spectrum. One thing that really comes out starting is that it's all a copy paste from the internet or from the regulations or some other organization. It is not customized. So what works for one will not work for the other. There has to be a senior management commitment, meaning that it is not there like any other compliance. Right from the board, you have a designated director, you have a principal officer. Every person is very important. Then the policies and procedures should be permeated and then should be sent across to everybody in the organization, right? Not only should be made available, it's there on the intranet portal is not sufficient. People should also know the what it means, because they also should be able to understand how they can address this, right? The current challenges here is that just that summarizing what we had all these days is that there's an increasing regulatory oversight. The past 1 year, you would have seen that lots of circulars have come from the PMLA records. One came in the month of March. Again, something had come yesterday. SEBI regular circulars, NSDL, CDSL, your exchanges, all of them come with circulars. RBI comes out with circulars. Every regulator comes, right? And it's going to get a little tougher because at the back of this mutual funds evaluation, a lot more of interesting things are going to come out, and then the expectations are going to be a lot more. So we've seen that. We talked of custom policies. If you just take for my own fun, I just took one policy. I used one of the plagiarism software, and guess what? 70% of the policy was actually plagiarized. Okay, I'm not. I can actually. Then it was a part of this, but then I said we shouldn't be doing that. The idea is to just convey the message, right? And then we don't have some very reliable database like politically exposed persons, and then ultimate beneficial owners are also becoming a little bit of a challenge. And what PMLA, the PMLA records, right, of March, they said that the corporates and the trust, they brought down the threshold from 25 and 15% to 10%. So it becomes that much more work, and you're not going to wait for SEBI to give you guidance. It will come in time, but then since it's a law of the land, the extant regulation supersedes the SEBI regulation. So each of you must go ahead and do that incremental 15% quickly, right? They don't have good transactions monitoring. We still know people who are using archaic monitoring software for Excel spreadsheets and all that stuff. May not be a great idea. And with all those things, there's a little bit of a trade-off between collection of so much of information and the data privacy, which is the other issue that we have. Let it balance them both. You're trying to address one, you can't go low on the other. And finally, it all comes down to availability of skilled resources. We don't have enough people, right, who understands the insights, right? You're not going to get something of how it works because it is your organization, your product, your people. You understand, you should know it better. But for you to put that into practice, you need to understand the basic context. Why are we asking? Why is it being asked to do? Why are we doing something that, well, I'll put it like this. What is the ask of the organization, of the government? What is the ask of the regulators from us, right? How can this be translated into an operating procedure that can make sure that my organization is living the expectations of the regulators? In that way, we are being the best gatekeepers to the economy, right? For that, it's only individual. It can't be coming from the organization alone, right? We all, organization gives us a salary. We all weekends we go out, we wear nice dresses, we have good fun because we are trying to rejuvenate ourselves, refresh ourselves. Like that, a training program, getting upskilling ourselves is in our own interest. The organization helps, that much good, but nothing is stopping you from doing it on your own because you're going to get the upside. So now I'm going to tell you what it means in terms of the scope, right? You can see here, right? I just taken some snippets from the various publicly available internet. You can see the sort of jobs that are available. Mumbai, Pune, Bengaluru, Singapore, Gulf, hundreds of things, including expats. Lots of it. The global offshoring center. It's no longer a bank or any of them. And also it is not that. Even if you're running a FMCG organization, even if you're running any of those big malls, e-commerce based, you still have to be aware of the AML requirement. It is no longer just a banking financial services problem. It is a problem of everybody, right? The more of it you will get to know when you get into the details of what it means of money laundering, how we can go about it. You will understand how the entire, you will start thinking differently, and maybe after this session also you'll start making sure that you will do something differently from what you are doing all the way. If you're a first time into money, formal training in money, is that only KYC which you think is KYC? But see here, transactions monitoring, right? You can see the specialist risk, principal officer, 90 of them. right? It's across, just not KYC. What sort of compensation? Again, from the various things, I'm just taking it from some of the publicly available thing and just giving you a sense, right? You can see the range, right? And from where it goes on, depending upon the experience and how experience, not only in terms of the years of doing the same thing, but also in terms of the how insightful one is and can add value, right? So it goes, even the average salary is 18 lakhs, and then it goes on to almost like 40 lakhs for some of the transaction monitoring centers. Yeah, it just to give you a sense, right? To say that it is a profession by itself. Okay, you start off this, but then how do we progress, right? What happens? I start somewhere. Can I see a career in that? Of course you can. This is thanks to the one of those nice thing, ICA, right? They're one of, just like ACAM, they're on another one, very famous compliance training institute in the world, the ICA, right? They come out with this. See, you can start off here as a trainee compliance audit assistant, right? Then you one progresses to compliance officer, to senior compliance manager, AML training consultant, fraud investigator, associate director. Then you progress there, and finally you head up. Over a period of 15 years, I would just say a person starting off here with the right sort of background, efforts, and hitting the ball out of the park every other year should be seeing something like a director of compliance or head of a chief compliance officer in the Indian parlance in about 12 to 15 years. It's not something that I would be surprised. You can have a career in AML. I want to take one moment here to say here you're talking of fraud investigator. Can you see here? You can see something called a fraud investigator. Why? There is a congruence of financial crime. A financial crime means there are three components of financial crime, which is fraud itself, money laundering, and the third one is bribery and corruption. As an organization, you need to handle all these things. So any control you put for one will also take care of some of the other controls. So you start doing something in AML, you study about AML, more about money laundering, how to prevent it, then probably you're also understanding more about how do you prevent fraud in your organization. Right? They're all like the same species, right? Some close cousins. So how do we go about doing this? Okay, but how do I get trained? Is there something that I can do? You need some formal training program, right? Like for me, I pay something like 50,000 rupees a year, right? For various training programs. I got so many certifications in information security, DCP, internal audit, fraud, money laundering. It's because you need to know the basic understanding you need to know. Then you are working in your organization, then you will be able to put that into practice. And therefore, you will be able to bridge the best practices that comes from your training. You will be able to implement it. And guess what? The outcome will be something that you will feel extremely proud of. And the career will just take off. And I have personally benefited by this, and that's what I'm trying to share it with you. And here are some, there are quite a few training programs in India, and all of them in small pieces, but I have taken some of those ones with which we are a common benchmark. One is ACAMS, which in some form can be the gold standard, I can say, or rather it's been there for a long time, because at least I passed it about some 15 years back, right? And it costs about $2,295 online training program. ICA has come out with a couple of them, right? You're talking of something like close to 2 lakhs and 4 lakhs. Very good programs, right? And around NISM, right, has come out with a certified anti-money laundering manager at 9,000 rupees, which is just about $110, right? One beautiful thing about this course, because I'm feeling so passionate about it, because Chris Consulting and personally I've been associated in putting in helping this course, is that we said, like, if this is something that we really think is a big thing to be taken care, it has to be made very affordable, right? And therefore you can see the dimensions, and that's where we see the comps saying here. So You can see here, still better if you're coming as a corporate, it is at 7,500 rupees, right? So what does it have, right? There are got about 7 modules. The 7 modules, the introduction to ML and core concepts, your legal regulatory framework. What are the various vulnerable? I just show you some of the modules, right? And then it goes to transactions monitoring and reporting, and finally risk and governance. You can see here a quick, of course, go to the e-store NISM. You will find the brochure. It's just a clipping of that. You can see how it goes from this. Starts from the basic, and then goes on to the legal regulatory framework, not only of the FATF, of European Union, of the Asian, all the various member units, right? FIU and SEBI's own master circulars, right? Why it's very important, because some of you might be working from an offshore centers, right? So you need to know the global stuff, and core concepts are something like that, irrespective of whether you're in a bank or in a securities or in mutual funds or in housing. You need to do this. It is the common ones. And then the next one is basically, which is basically the, I'm sorry, there's a typo there. It should be the vulnerabilities there. You can see how the various, say, each and every business, how is it prone to money laundering and what needs to be done. That is captured in the next 17 different modules. And you have this, again, the transactions monitoring, reporting agencies, and finally rounds off with risk and governance. In fact, we have one program specifically on mutual fund evaluation, what it means, which is basically what currently India is undergoing. Right? And also, some of us might be called for by FATF, right? Because they come and individually call out some of the market participants and then have a one-on-one dialogue. No regulators, nobody, just about 5-6 members from FATF, and the intermediary can be anybody from the intermediary will be called, and to take them through how you handle this. So some of you or your seniors, some of them might be called. So it's coming to almost last of it. In terms of summaries, it's a master class, right? As you can see, it's about 47 modules. I call it as global outlook because this particular course is applicable to any part of the world. You can be US, UK, Singapore, UAE, anywhere, because the origin is of this course. The origin of this is FATF. So it talks of the concepts and then zooms into the India, right? Industry agnostic, because you can see that it is practically, why it's very industry agnostic, because the launderers, the criminals, they're trying to get one up on the other. So you can't go down, these are the 10 things that you need to take care, but you need to know, you should have your antennae slightly tuned to make sure that something is not looking all right. Let me start investigating it. Probably you're right. There was something that really should have been done and you did the right thing. It all comes from getting awareness about the other industries as well. Finally, you have your periodic online. There are immediate access on registration. It's an interactive quiz all the way. Evaluation, 2 hours, 100 marks, 60% is a passing rate. We've been finding that people are getting this, but yeah, we do find some people on the borderline. It also happen in camps and other things as well, right? And finally, it's a thing offered by NISM. And on that note, right, I'd like to say that the challenges are aplenty globally, as a government, jurisdiction, as regulators, and each of us as part of this ecosystem. And we have a very unique role to play, our own ways, like my own self or the NISM, we're all trying to create the capacity building and help this particular process. So I'd like to each of you to introspect on this and see how you can be a part of this. And I'm very happy to take the questions. Once again, thank you for a patient listening. Nancy.
Thank you so much, sir. Very enriching session. And I think we have some questions, and I believe you were answering the question. Candidates are requested to, please put their questions in the Q&As box, and we hope to answer all of them one by one. So if you are aware, sir, there is one question which is by Rohan Soni, which says, which first of all, the candidates are really impressed by the session, and they say that it is a very insightful session, and they are thanking you for the same. So what they want to know is how the advancement in AI and ML will assist or facilitate AML initiatives in fintech companies. So how likely is that the need for KYC AML analyst will be lesser and lesser in future as the AI will be integrated in the platform? So basically, they are trying to want to know the scope of an AML analyst in this ever-growing AI.
AI and ML is a great feature, right? It's basically like if you see one thing that really, when I'm looking out as a risk manager, right, I go around with all the clients. The SEBI master thing, they are given you a set of red flags. RBI has come out with the red flags. Most of the things are all, people are all hanging around with that, right? That's a minimum compliance. That's only indicative. But what happens is, do you know your customer well? How can you do, especially across the various, the past, the present, what has been the average, what has been the normal, is it above, below, some sort of using a fuzzy logic to come out with some insights. Data is there. The data has to be properly looked into as information, right? And finally, the officers there who are like you all who are there should be presented in a way as insights. And therefore, AI and ML, there are quite a few fintechs, right? And quite a few service providers are there who are one up on these things and providing excellent service in that space. And it's only getting better. Yes, yeah, the larger the organization, that much more, especially with complex products. But definitely AI and ML are very helpful in that space.
I hope the question is well answered. We have one more question, that predicate offense is a prerequisite for PMLA. So does this make difference in detecting money laundering in corporate governance matters?
I'm sorry, can you come in with?
So it is about predicate offense. So predicate offense is a prerequisite for PMLA. So does this make difference in detecting money laundering in corporate governance matters?
See, what happens is money laundering, because there is no way by which, if a money was legitimate, right, why would anybody want to launder it, right? So it is but obvious that there has to be an original crime. That's what we call it as predicate offense, and that outcome is called the proceeds of crime. So that particular stuff may be outside the scope of the institutions, the banks, the securities intermediaries, right? They may not be involved in that, and also involved. Is it confusing? Yes, because most of the predicate offenses could be outside the scope of the institution, except a few. Like for instance, securities market, insider trading, market manipulation, front running, mis-selling, all these things are predicate offenses originating in securities market itself and also being a part of the money laundering process. So to that extent, you are both. If you're a housing finance company, you have a profile fraud and then fake profiles and then issuing out loans, all those things, right? Collusions with the builders, all those things are all predicate offense, as well as in some form the institutions might be involved. Largely, it will be something that it will start where the proceeds of crime has been completed and taken. And that's why if you are filing a suspicious transactions report to the FIU, it doesn't mean, and if your criminal records require that you need to file a police complaint, you have to do it. Because you're filing an STR doesn't mean that you did not file a fraud. Both are two independent requirements.
Are there any questions? So candidates, you can, drop in your question in the Q&A
I'm
box.
seeing one question here is FATF is controlled by who? No, it is an intergovernmental agency. It's based in Paris. And yeah, so it is at the ministerial level. It's a very powerful staff. It is not controlled by anybody. It's a part of the, initially started by G7. I don't understand what is, it's PA or per month. I think it must be in reference to the 2% or 5% we're talking about. I assume that that is 2% or 2 to 5% per annum. Okay. Any other questions? See, technology is the easiest part. You throw money in, you will get any technology. But what are you going to do with it? Are you, because I know so many people who have not customized this stuff. Whatever the vendor gives, they're using it. Are you customizing your software to your requirements? Are you fine-tuning it? Having come, are you doing a proper investigation? Are you able to, close it properly? Based on that, are you making some changes? Are you, no, it's, RegTech is a small utility, but how you make use of it is purely a particular one organization's way to it. And it is not a, having it might be one of the expectations from the regulator, but what is more important is how well you use it.
So there is one question that, are there any opportunities in freelance consulting in AML? If yes, what would be the size?
Oh, freelance consulting. See, it all comes like this, right? Like for instance, there are so many, somewhere I read there are about 17,000 reporting entities in the world, in the country, right? Everybody needs to be trained. So I think the pie is huge, right? So, and it all comes from how well you position yourself, your own branding, how you're able to add value. And definitely it doesn't, even I have been there and it has not been, it's, so you're most welcome and best wishes, right? And the pie is big. Please come. There are a lot more people need to be trained, and with the yesterday PMLR, it also goes to CAs, ICWAs, and CS, and all of them, right? So a lot more people need to be trained on AML. So come on, join the party.
Very true.
The salary which we receive, you show the data was per month or
Per month or per annum.
I think it is all per annum. So you can just go and see. What I did was I went and put it in the internet, right? And then it threw me, gave me that stuff. So just to give you a sense of, anything else? My limited stuff is, I don't know how many of you are practicing AML who have got their responsibilities, but please, my request to you is that customize your policies, have your good transactions monitoring software, your UBO related stuff, make sure it happens, right? And the penalties could be disproportionate. You might say, like, normally say, but how many STRs have you filed? Suspicious transactions report, nothing. You can't file everything because, okay, that's a defensive reporting. File everybody so that we don't have a problem. That again is an issue, right? As an institution, you are supposed to investigate and determine why it is suspicious and report. You can't say take it all. That also is not acceptable. So do that properly. And even if you don't have a proper framework, policies and all that stuff, it can bite you. It can come out very heavy and the penalties are disproportionate. That's why you can see something like $2 billion and $9 billion and all that stuff, right? The penalties are extremely harsh and can be as a precedent. Please take particular attention. Training. It's just not sending out emails to everybody with a few slides to say, please, as a training, give a little more context and examples how people should do. You may think it's cost of compliance is increasing. It's not cost of compliance. It's the cost of doing business, right? Any more questions? Let me see. I can see something else here. When will this course start? It's already on. It's been going on for a year now. You can, as we speak, you can, I'm sure, Nancy, people can do an online registration right away, right?
Yes, they can do it. The registrations are open throughout the year. So this course is already there live, and you can go through it by reaching out to NISM's website as well. So this particular course doesn't has a starting or an ending date. It's an ongoing course.
And if you're coming through with a few of your colleagues, it is that much cheaper. As not that 9,000 rupees is a lot compared to the other things, right?
Yes, I can. I think they will discover it through by visiting the page itself. So it's
Yeah.
fine. So I think we are done with the questions now, sir. Thank you so much for giving your valuable time. And we know you have always been so endearing that, whenever we call you up, you are always there to attend these sessions. And it is really so, it is always so, enriching. And we also get ourselves updated, our knowledge updated from you. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for your time. Thank you so much to the audience. And it was really an endearing session. I hope you all also enjoyed and learned the same way as I did. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you, participants. Thank you, Nancy, and wish you all a wonderful long weekend. Take care.